Are your podcast episodes not showing up in YouTube's podcast tab? That's a super frustrating place to be, especially when you know your content is great, but it's just not getting the discoverability it deserves. The good news is there's a very specific fix for this, and that's exactly what we're covering today. By the end of this video, you'll have a dedicated podcast channel with a proper RSS feed and all the podcast-specific features YouTube offers, so your episodes actually get found. So here's the plan. I'm going to walk you through setting up your podcast from scratch inside YouTube Studio, covering the title, description, visibility, and that all-important square thumbnail. We're going step by step, just like I'm sitting next to you. All right, let's jump in. The first thing you need to do is head over to YouTube Studio. This is your command center for everything channel related, and it's where all the podcast magic happens. Now, once you're in the Studio dashboard, look up to the top right corner. You'll see a button labeled Create. Go ahead and click that, and from the drop-down menu, select New Podcast. This is the dedicated doorway YouTube built specifically for podcasters, and it's directly from their official documentation, so you know it's the right path. When the new window opens up, you'll have two choices. You can either convert an existing playlist into a podcast, which is great if you've already organized your episodes, or you can select Create a New Podcast. For this walkthrough, let's choose Create a New Podcast, so we build it fresh from the ground up. And this is where we get into the details. First up is the podcast title. This is the name of your show, and you want it to be both catchy and search-friendly. Think about the words someone might type into the search bar to find content like yours. Make it clear and memorable. Next is the description. This is your chance to tell both YouTube and your potential listeners exactly what your podcast is about. Write a detailed, keyword-rich summary. Don't just write interview show. Be specific, like in-depth conversations with indie game developers about their creative process. The more context you give, the easier it is for YouTube to understand and recommend your content. Now, pay attention to this one because it's a common mistake. You need to set your visibility to public. If you leave it on private or unlisted, nobody is going to see it in the podcast tab or any podcast directories. So make sure that toggle is set to public so listeners can actually find your show. And here's the really important part that makes this official. You need to upload a square podcast thumbnail. This is your podcast cover art. YouTube specifically requires a square image, so think 1280 by 1280 pixels. This is the image that will appear in podcast apps and RSS feeds, so make sure it looks good and represents your brand. If you upload a standard rectangular video thumbnail, it won't work for the podcast format. Once you've got all that filled out, go ahead and click the blue Create button at the bottom to save everything. That's it. You've officially created your podcast on YouTube Studio. So to recap, you went from having episodes lost in a sea of regular uploads to having a dedicated podcast setup with the right metadata and cover art that YouTube recognizes. Now your content is eligible to show up in that podcast tab and be distributed through proper RSS feeds. This one change can open up a whole new audience for your show. Give it a shot and let me know how it goes. Happy podcasting!